So I've been on, I think, 15 or so Royal Caribbean cruises. We're definitely a Royal Caribbean family, but this summer we tried Carnival for the first time, and I'll be honest, I didn't really know what to expect. I'd heard all the stereotypes, the party vibe, kind of chaotic, lousy food, but what actually happened surprised me in a good way. Okay, so on our recent sailing with Carnival, we went on Carnival Celebration. This was in July of 2025, and I had a lot of assumptions about Carnival before going on it. Some of them were what you typically hear. The food would be subpar. I thought it might be too much of a party scene compared to what I'd experienced in Royal Caribbean. I had this preconception that the entertainment would be a drop off from what I'm used to. Just a whole bunch of negative connotations that I had heard, being that I had sailed Royal many times. I had been told that Carnival would be a significant step down. I remember specifically dealing with a travel agent in the past, not recently, but a while back, where we talked to them about different cruise lines, and they knew that we liked Royal Caribbean, and we asked them about Carnival, and they told us very specifically, if you go on Carnival after going on Royal, that we would end up being severely disappointed. So you can see going into this, we didn't have, the best expectations just based on what we had already been told from other people, what we had read online. But with that being said, we did go into it with an open mind. We did our research. We tried to get one of the newer ships that Carnival had to offer. And with that, we decided to sail on Carnival Celebration, which has only been sailing for about 4 years. Okay, so jumping right into it, I just wanted to discuss some of the things that surprised me in a good way and what I appreciated that Carnival did. One thing that stood out to us was the cruise director. The cruise director, he was from the UK, I believe, and he was very hands-on. He was very engaging. He seemed to elevate the experience, where it feels like a lot of the times when we go on Royal Caribbean, we may know who the cruise director is, but they don't seem to have that. They're not as charismatic as the cruise director was for Carnival. He was very engaging. He made all the activities a lot more fun. He was very good when it came to the game shows. He was just a very good cruise director, and we appreciated that very much. One of the biggest things going on a Carnival cruise that we were concerned about was the food variety and quality. We had heard that it would not be very good. And in reality, it was actually the complete opposite of that. We had very good experiences with all of the food that we ate throughout this 7-day Carnival cruise. We regularly ate at the main dining room, and I don't remember having a single night where I was disappointed in the food that we received. It was definitely on par with what Royal Caribbean offers in the main dining room, and in many ways, and many of the dishes, it probably or definitely did exceed what we had been experiencing on Royal Caribbean cruises in the last few years. We really did like our experience in the main dining room. This is probably just random. This is probably just the server that we had. We didn't really get to know our server very well. Yes, they were friendly with us every night. We would have a little bit of small talk with them. They'd ask us if we were going to a show, but I didn't really learn much about them, and maybe that's partly our fault. Maybe we didn't ask enough questions, but I do feel like typically when we're on a Royal Caribbean cruise, we do get to know our servers a little bit better, learn a little bit about them, where that just didn't happen on this cruise. And that's not a dig on Carnival per se. This may have just been the server that we had this time. Another thing that we really liked about the dinner dining for Carnival was that they actually have 2 restaurants located on the ship that were not an extra charge, but we could go and make reservations there. So it made it seem like a specialty dining restaurant. You got to decide, I don't want to eat in the main dining room tonight, so I'm going to book one of these other restaurant options, but it wasn't considered specialty dining. It didn't cost you anything extra. And that was Cucina del Capitano, which served primarily Italian. And that's actually where we ate, and it was actually very good. And the other option was a restaurant called Chabang, which serves Chinese and Mexican fusion venue. We actually didn't eat there, but that was another option that you can have while on your Carnival cruise. If you decide you like it so much you want to eat there a second time, that's fine. They'll just charge you $8 per person. Continuing to talk about the food, I want to touch on the lunch venues that are available on Carnival Celebration. I say lunch venues because that's what we typically ate for our lunches, but you could choose to eat it in the evening as well for your dinner. And those were Blue Iguana Cantina, which is where you can build your own burritos or tacos. They had a toppings bar where you could put sour cream and lettuce and tomatoes and all that you would want on your burrito or your tacos. They had Guy's Burger Joint, which was made to order burgers where you could pick your toppings. They had fries there. That was actually really good. That's, Guy Fieri's place. And then they had another Guy Fieri themed place, which was Guy's Pig and Anchor Barbecue. This was probably my favorite. You would go there, you could get barbecue chicken, you could get ribs, you could get pork, sausage. They had all the meats. They had all the different barbecue sauces. You could get baked beans, coleslaw. It just was a really good restaurant and an excellent option for really lunch or dinner. And the last one was called Big Chicken, which is actually owned by Shaquille O'Neal. It's a chain restaurant that he has that has a partnership with Carnival. And they had Big Chicken on the ship, which is where you can get chicken sandwiches. You can get different styles, one of the styles being Shack style. And you can get chicken strips, you can get baskets with sides. It was very flavorful chicken. And all four of these options, whether it be Blue Iguana Cantina, Big Chicken, or the two different Guy Fieri places, were definitely superior eating options. When we sail on Royal Caribbean, we really do like El Loco Fresh, which is the complimentary Mexican and Tex-Mex spot, which has the tacos or burritos similar to what Blue Iguana Cantina has. So I would say that those are probably very similar between the two different cruise lines. But where Carnival definitely stood out was the other options, is where they had the two Guy Fieri places. They had the Shaquille O'Neal themed chicken place. That's something that you definitely will not find on Royal Caribbean cruise lines. So I just felt like the lunch options were definitely superior on the Carnival cruise that we just experienced. Another unique option that Carnival had on this ship was an area called Street Eats, which was a whole bunch of little setup, almost like a mall venue type restaurant where you go in and get a quick snack. They had Time Fries, they had Mad Sizzle, they had Steamed Dream. Out of those three, I only tried Time Fries, but I really was a fan of that. And that's where you would go and get an order of fries. They had all these toppings you could put on it. You could put sour cream or green onions or chili or whatever you wanted to put on it, and just have like a side of French fries. And that was excellent snack option that they had on the ship. Moving on to the final three venues I wanted to touch on for lunch options. Carnival had Miami Slice, which is their pizza place that you can get pizza anytime you want. They had Deco Deli, which is where you can get deli sandwiches and salads. And they had Lido Marketplace, which is the main buffet for all meals. You can have breakfast, lunch, or dinner there. And Royal Caribbean obviously has equivalent options for those three. They have Sorrento's Pizza, Park Cafe when you're on an Oasis class ship, and then Windjammer Cafe. I would say that the three of these are pretty comparable. I think that Sorrento's probably slightly beats out Miami Slice in terms of the flavor of the pizza, but they're both very similar. You can get fresh hot pizza anytime you want. Deco Deli and Park Cafe are very similar in terms of their offerings. And then Lido Marketplace and Windjammer Cafe, again, those are just the buffets. Those are going to be similar between the different cruise lines. So I wouldn't say that I was disappointed with Carnival's offerings or that I was impressed with any of these three offerings. They were just very much what I experienced on Royal Caribbean. So it was probably about a tie on each of these, to be honest. And while we're talking about food, we've talked about dinner, we've talked about lunch options. I'll just talk real quick on a couple of additional snacks that are available on the ship. You have self-serve ice cream machines, which we were very impressed with on Carnival Celebration. They seem to be very numerous throughout the ship. I'm used to seeing one, maybe two on a Royal Caribbean ship. And it seemed like every time we were going to a new deck or new area, there was a self-serve, soft-serve ice cream station. And in addition to that, they typically had a frozen yogurt station directly next to it, so you can get frozen yogurt or soft-serve ice cream. And then the third option was if you wanted to venture over to Lido Marketplace, the buffet area, they had rotating gelato options every day. So you had really three different kinds of ice creams available. You had ice cream, which was the soft serve, you had frozen yogurt, and then you had gelato as an option. So all three of those were complimentary, and you could find them throughout the ship. So I was very impressed with that. The last thing that I'll mention, which I really appreciated, was when you're in the Lido Marketplace or when you're in the Pig and Anchor barbecue area, you actually have the ability to self-serve sodas or beer for that matter. If you don't have a soda package or a drink package, you can actually swipe your card and you can pay per ounce to get soda or to get beer. And I think that's a very awesome option rather than having to go to a bartender and pay for a drink. Or if you have your drink package, you can swipe at those. I didn't have a drink package, so I don't know this for sure, but I'm assuming that you could probably go to those stations and self-serve yourself if you actually did purchase the alcohol package or the soda package. I know I've talked at length about the food, so now that I've done that, I want to move on to other things about this Carnival cruise that we experienced. I want to touch on the activities on board. And when I say activities, I want to first focus on the outdoor activities. They have several water slides on this ship, which were actually very good. I feel like often when you go on cruise ship water slides, they, for whatever reason, go really slow. And I didn't experience that at all on these ones. They all seemed very fast and enjoyable, and people weren't getting stuck on them. One thing that is definitely unique for this cruise ship that I need to touch on is that they actually have a roller coaster at sea. It's called Bolt, the Ultimate Sea Coaster, and it's located in the Ultimate Playground, which is on the top decks. It circles around the ship where you're overlooking the water below you, or you're overlooking a ship next to you if you're at a port. And that was very unique, and it was actually very enjoyable. There were a couple things I did want to touch on about it, though, that I feel like could be improved upon. And the first is that I didn't love that it was $15 per person to ride the roller coaster. You know, I get it. Not everything's going to be included. I wish that this was. Maybe it's not practical for them to include the roller coaster in the price, but that would be awesome if it was. Maybe they could do something where on port days it's included, or you don't have to pay anything extra on port days if you stay on the ship. I know Royal's done a similar approach to some of their onboard activities where they'll charge you when you're out at sea for certain things, but then when you're in port, they'll let you do it complimentary. One thing that they offered with the roller coaster, which I wasn't able to take advantage of because it didn't have a way of letting you do that within the app, was they offered a special where if you were to buy 2 rides, you get a third for free. And when you go to purchase the ride, it makes you choose who is going to ride it. So if you don't have 3 unique riders, then it's not going to let you double up and pick yourself to ride once and someone else to ride twice. You're going to have 3 unique people. And I wish that they would fix that because me and my son ended up riding it twice on this cruise. So we paid $30 twice. We paid $60 to ride it twice. But if we would have been able to take advantage of it, we should have been able to ride it 3 times for that $60, taking advantage of the buy 2, get 1 free. But there's no way to elect that option to say, I'm going to buy 2 for myself and ride the third one free, and buy 2 for my son and ride the third one free. They didn't have a way of doing that within the app. Maybe you can go to customer service or somewhere else on the ship and get help and make that happen, but it didn't have that functionality within the app. So I think that would be a good improvement if they made that an option within the app to where you could just take advantage of the 2-for-1 special. Something else that they offered on this cruise in that same realm of fun activities was they actually have a ropes course. They have a ropes course in the same general area of where Bolt is. It is on the upper decks, and that was actually complimentary. You could go do the ropes course as much as you wanted. And it was actually a lot of fun. The first time my son did it by himself, he was a little scared because it is pretty high. You know, you're 150 feet above the water because you're 15 plus decks up, and you're overlooking the water from these ropes course stations that you're maneuvering around on the ship. And they actually have a plank where you can walk out, and you could literally be over the edge of the ship looking down at the water 150 feet below you. And they have a zip line area where you can actually zip line, and it takes you outside the ship a little bit. It jettisons out, and then you come back. And that too was very adrenaline pumping, I guess, if for lack of a better word. That's something that my son did a couple of times. I chose personally not to do the zip line. I just didn't like the idea of it, but it is definitely a good complimentary activity that they have on the ship for kids, but it's also fun for adults to do as well. So I really liked that. Moving on from the outdoor activities that I really enjoyed on the Carnival cruise, I wanted to touch real quickly on some of the entertainment options that were available. And for this particular cruise, maybe it's offered on all of their sailings, they actually had Family Feud and Deal or No Deal. If you're watching this video, you're probably familiar with those game shows that are on TV and have been very popular. Those were excellent activities that they offered, or excellent shows that they did on the ship. I've experienced Family Feud before on Royal Caribbean cruises, and the execution of it was subpar. It just wasn't done very well. It didn't feel authentic. It just really wasn't done as well as it was on the Carnival cruise. Carnival, they did a really good job of making Family Feud and Deal or No Deal be exactly like the game show is that you see on TV. For Family Feud, they actually had tryouts leading up to when they actually had the final Family Feud competition. Throughout the week, on the first 5 days or so, maybe the first 4 days, they had families that were interested in it try out and do preliminary auditions and tryouts and rounds to qualify to be the ones that actually participated in the full-fledged Family Feud episode that would happen towards the end of the cruise on nights. I can't remember what night it was. It was like night 5 or 6. And I think doing that makes the entertainment value of that show a lot better than if they would have just picked randomly from the crowd when everybody showed up. And then going to Deal or No Deal, we're all very familiar with that. I really like the way they handled that as well. What they did is they actually had the ability for you to buy basically a lottery ticket you would buy before the show, and then they would randomly have a number drawn that would identify who was going to be the participant for Deal or No Deal. And they actually did 2 iterations of Deal or No Deal. So you saw one go, and then once they were done, they did another drawing, and then a second person went. And that was actually very entertaining. And they ran it superbly. They had it just like the show where you would call the banker and get your offer, and then the contestant would have to decide whether they wanted to take the deal or do no deal. They had the button, they could slam it down. It was superbly done. It was just like watching it on TV. And the thing that made the second iteration so entertaining was that the individual that went, he ended up never taking the deal and going all the way to the end. And he got to the very end where it was like a 50-50 between the case that he chose and the one that he didn't choose. And he still had the highest denomination available, which on the ship was $1,000. And he decided to just go for it. And he never took the deal. And he actually kept the case that he picked in the beginning. And surprisingly, he actually had the $1,000 case. So we actually saw him win the $1,000 prize. So that was obviously a lot of fun to see. So when comparing Carnival and Royal with regards to the game shows they offer, Carnival by far exceeded what Royal does in that world in terms of Deal or No Deal, Family Feud. Royal doesn't do anything specifically like that to where it matches what it is on TV. I've been there where they've done Family Feud before and it wasn't done very well. I've seen them do variations of Name That Tune, but this was just done better than anything I've seen on Royal Caribbean with regards to game shows. Another thing I want to touch on has to do with the seating around the outdoor areas, the deck chairs that you have around the pools. And I just wanted to say that it seemed like there was always an abundance of chairs on this Carnival cruise. It didn't matter if it was a sea day or a port day. Obviously, on port days, there's going to be chairs on whatever cruise line you're on because the majority of the passengers will get off the ship and then the pools will be empty and you can basically pick of any chair you want. On sea days, typically, the chairs are going to be full. I've been on many Royal Caribbean cruises where it's extremely difficult to find a chair and you have to wait around and see if somebody leaves. It makes it very difficult to get one chair, let alone 2, 3, 4 chairs if you have a family and you're trying to get them together. That wasn't our experience on this cruise ship at all. It seemed like there was always an abundance of deck chairs. You weren't necessarily always going to get, the first row next to the pool. That's understandable. Those are going to be the first ones to go. But we had no difficulty at all finding pool chairs throughout the duration of the cruise, even if we slept in or went to the pool a little bit later on a sea day. The Lido pool, which is the main pool, is obviously going to be the one that fills up the quickest, and that would be the one that may present a little bit of a challenge sometimes during their peak times of getting a chair. But in general, we could always walk to another pool, another deck, and find outdoor seating, and that was a pleasant surprise, and we really appreciated that there was plenty of deck chairs available for all passengers. I wanted to take a moment and just discuss the Carnival Hub app, which is the app that you use while on the cruise, and Royal Caribbean has their similar app that they offer as well. And we really, really liked the Carnival Hub app, and it just felt like it had a lot more modern capabilities that Royal Caribbean doesn't offer. We really liked that it showed you when a child was checked in and checked out from Camp Ocean. For our son, he was 10, so we were always the one that checked him in and checked him out. But we also traveled with another family, so we linked our accounts and we were able to see when their kids were checked in and checked out as well. So that was just very convenient. And then this is also a really good feature if you allowed your child to check themselves out. I think at a certain age, you can authorize them to check themselves in and out of the camp. So it would be very beneficial to be able to see in the app when a child checks in and check out. But it didn't just end there. It just seemed like there was a lot of little nuances within the app that were superior to what we've experienced on Royal Caribbean. One thing that we really liked was that when you go to the casino, you swipe your card and you could decide how much money you want to put on the slot machine. For example, let's say you wanted to put $20 on a slot machine. That's fine. It'll charge it to your room, and it'll show up on your folio, and it'll settle at the end of the cruise. But what we liked was decided to play on a slot machine. Let's say you put $20 in there, and let's say you ran your money up to 50, or maybe you lost a little bit and went down to 10, and you wanted to cash out and go to another slot machine. It doesn't print you out a voucher that you have to then go cash in, and you could potentially lose it or misplace it. It actually just goes right back on your card, so it keeps a running balance of what you have on your card in terms of what can be used on the slot machine. So you cash out, it goes right to your card, you go to your next slot machine, you just swipe your card again, and it's going to pull up the balance of what you have. You can decide how much money you want to put on that slot machine from your balance, or to deposit additional money if you lost your $20, whatever you started with from before. That was a really nice feature. It also updates how many points you've earned within the casino. Once you hit certain thresholds, obviously Carnival will offer you certain discounts or free cruises. I'm not going to get into that on this video, but it does make it very easy to see how many points you've earned. And speaking about the casino itself, we actually really enjoyed that. It just seemed very modern. The layout was very spread out. It didn't seem crammed at all. A nice ambiance to it, and we did not experience it being very smoky. Sometimes on other cruises on Royal Caribbean, we would be in the casino, and while they have a separate area for smoking, it all is pretty close together, so the smoke just wanders from one area to the other. So often you'd find yourself in a smoky area, even though it may be considered no smoking. And we didn't experience that at all in this casino. Honestly, I didn't really pay that close of attention to if they had a separate smoking area, or if they all had to just leave and go to the designated smoking areas, which are on certain decks. I don't know how they handled it, to be honest. I didn't notice it, so that was definitely a plus in that I didn't experience a smoky environment in the casino when that's something that when that's something that I would prefer to avoid. Now, this is going to be a small thing, especially considering that on a cruise ship, you're probably not going to be spending a lot of time in your room, but you do spend some time in your room, whether it be in the evening before you go to bed if you're winding down, or maybe you're taking a nap or just relaxing. You do have some downtime where you want to recoup, you want to recharge in your room. And I really liked that Carnival had on-demand movies available, and they didn't cost too much in the first place. I think the most expensive ones on there were around $8, so you could get some fairly new movies on there for $8. But they also had free movie offerings on there. Not something that you experience on Royal Caribbean. All the on-demand movies on Royal Caribbean used to be complimentary. You can watch what you wanted. They've done away with that, and they charge a lot per movie. I don't remember the exact amount. It might be $12, might be $20. I remember it being to a point where I never purchased the movies on a Royal Caribbean cruise. And with this, I didn't purchase any movies on Carnival, but it was nice that if I did, they were only $8. But I did watch a couple of the on-demand free movies, and they had some good movie offerings. I don't remember specifically what movie or movies I decided to watch, but I remember the library options for the free on-demand options were very good, and they were definitely movies that you had heard of and ones that you would enjoy watching. So that was definitely something that I appreciated that Carnival offered on this cruise. I know I've taken a lot of time talking about the things that I was surprised by with Carnival, or things that I really enjoyed, but it wouldn't be an accurate portrayal or assessment if I didn't also touch on the things that I either didn't like or that could be improved upon. I definitely have to admit the list of what I didn't like on this cruise is a lot shorter than what I did like on this cruise. There's only a couple of things that are worthy of mentioning, so I'm going to take the time now just to touch on those real quick. One thing that my wife and I personally didn't like, or that we see an area for improvement, was the lack of organized casino activities. We really enjoy that when we go on a Royal Caribbean cruise, they have lots of organized activities in the casino. And what I mean by that is they have slot tournaments that are really cheap, like $20 to participate in that. They have blackjack tournaments, which are the same, $20, $25. They also have cash no-limit hold'em games that they hold in the casino where you play against other passengers from the ship, and I really enjoy doing that in the evenings. That's not something they offer on this Carnival cruise. Maybe they offer them on others, but that wasn't our experience. They didn't have any blackjack tournaments, slot tournaments, or offer poker where you could play against other passengers. So that's an area where they could improve upon that and offer a couple of those activities. This is going to be minor, but every day my son and I would go to breakfast at the Lido Marketplace, which is the buffet, and they didn't have bacon every day. They seemed to rotate the breakfast meats. They would have sausage one day, bacon the next, ham the next, and I really wish they would have had bacon available every day. That's a very minor thing. I understand what they're doing. They're trying to rotate it just to have a variety and switch it up. But I mean, bacon's definitely the best of the breakfast meats, and it'd be nice to have that available every day, or at least more than every third day. So that was something that I thought could be improved upon in the breakfast buffet. Now, this one I want to touch on real quick. It had to do with the hot pool decks. The pool decks were extremely hot. This may have had more to do with the fact that we were sailing in July. Maybe it's always like this. I'm not really sure. But the pool decks were so hot, and you literally could not walk from your chair to the pool without your shoes because it would severely burn the bottom of your feet. And I'm not talking like you just hop real quickly and get to the pool and be okay with it. Like, no, like it was going to cause whatever degree burns on your feet because it was that hot on the pool deck if you walked without shoes. You had to walk with your shoes to the edge of the pool, take them off, and quickly get in the pool, or you were severely going to burn the bottom of your feet. You saw a lot of shoes right around the pool because that's what everybody had to do. They also seemed to take it a little too far with the rules for the kids in the pool. I get it. You don't want kids creating havoc and jumping in the pool and splashing a lot, but they took it to an extreme. Like, there was absolutely no splashing, it seemed like it was like a no fun zone for the kids in the pool. They were very strict. It was basically like get in the pool, wade in the water, and maybe swim back and forth a little bit, but you couldn't do really anything else without the lifeguards telling you not to do that. And that was a little bit of a bummer for the kids that we had. We had a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 6-year-old with us on this trip, and a couple of them, the younger ones, they got to the point where they were like, I don't even want to go to the pool because it's not fun for us. We can't have fun in there. So that was something that could be improved upon for this Carnival cruise. Maybe they have a pool where they are a little more lenient on that. But I get it. They have an activity area for kids, a splash area. It has slides. It has a splash area, but it's not a pool. Like, some kids want to be able to swim in a pool and enjoy that. They just took it a little bit too far in terms of how strict they were with the kids. So this is probably my biggest complaint I had on the ship, and this was more of an annoyance than anything, and that was that the door sensors for the doors as you approach them. When you walk up to doors at department stores, when you go shopping, grocery stores, Walmart, wherever you go, Target, the doors will open as you approach them. They have a sensor, they open up, and you just walk into the store. On this cruise, Carnival had sensors on these doors, but they were not detecting your body movement as you approach the door. What they were is they had a little circle as you approached it, and you had to wave your hand once you got up to the door. And these sensors were very hit or miss. You would often walk up to the door, you would get right up to the door, you'd have to wave your hand at it, and it didn't always register with the sensors. You would stand there sometimes 10, 20, 30 seconds trying to get it to register that you were standing there for it to open. And it was very frustrating because it just slowed the flow of traffic. Sometimes it would cause like a backup at the door because everybody was trying to get through it, and the door wouldn't open. It had a sensor where you couldn't hit a button, you couldn't force it open. You had to wave your hand in front of the sensor, and sometimes it just didn't work well. So that was something that was a miss on this cruise ship that needs to be improved upon. I don't know what the fix is for that, but it didn't work well most of the time. So now that I've touched on what I liked and didn't like about Carnival's cruise, coming from a Royal Caribbean enthusiast, someone who's been loyal to Royal Caribbean for the most part, I wanted to give my final thoughts and just talk about how my perception has definitely shifted after this cruise. Going into it, I didn't have high expectations. I expected to be disappointed in many areas, to include the food, the entertainment, the ship in general, and that just wasn't my experience. I came away from it feeling like this cruise was on par with Royal Caribbean, and in many areas, it was better than Royal Caribbean. And it's definitely something that I would like to do again in the future. The few things that I talked about that I didn't like weren't even that significant. They were minor things that could be fixed. The door sensors is probably an easy fix if Carnival were to decide to address that. The hot pool deck may be a little bit more difficult, but that's not, it doesn't take away from the experience you have on the cruise ship. It's just inconveniences more than anything. So I would definitely cruise on Carnival again, and I'm sure that we will in the future. We don't have anything lined up as of yet, but it's definitely on our radar and something we'd like to do again moving forward. This was our first experience, Carnival Celebration. We sailed out of Florida, and it was an awesome experience. I'd love to hear from the people that watched this video up to this point, I'd love to hear what cruise lines have you cruised on? Have you cruised on both? Do you prefer Royal? Do you prefer Carnival? I'd love to hear your experiences, what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy. If you watched up to this point, please like, subscribe, and check out for our upcoming videos. I appreciate you watching this video, and I look forward to creating more for you. Thanks.